Hello, everyone. Welcome to Weekends with Amit. Today, we also have a little bit of a variation. We'll come to that in a while. Before that, let me let you know what is the uh, subject of today's talk. And today's talk is the second edition. You remember in the last week, Amit promised there will be another edition to this, is quantum leadership and business. Now, this is a subject which is so important concerning what is going on around all of us that it really cannot be contained in one short 30-40 minutes episode. And on this, a lot of work is being done by a lot of people, Professor Goswami included. And to assist Professor Goswami, there are a few PhD scholars who are already established in their own fields and they are contributing to the best of their abilities to make quantum business and leadership something to reckon with. And this is the need of the hour. It's not just some kind of a leisurely read or amusement watch, but it is something which is of critical importance to all of us. Now, keeping the gravity of that in mind, let me introduce you to Professor Goswami, of course, and Sujit Ravindran. Now, before we go into the actual discussion, let me say a few words about Sujit Ravindran. Who is Sujit? Sujit, foremost, is our PhD scholar. Uh, we are very, very fortunate to have him as a part of our program. Sujit is the co founder of the WISE EU Foundation, a global think tank that supports the European Commission in the areas of policy shaping and policy action. He is a global traveler, sits on boards of several impact initiatives, is a TEDx speaker, and serial author of several books on leadership and personal development available in 10 plus languages. In 2012, he was conferred the honor of Ambassador of Peace by the Council of Assisi, Italy, for his efforts on spiritual upliftment. He lives in Italy with his family and two kids. So of course he has his wife and two kids. Sujit, a very very warm welcome in today's show.
Thank you. Thank you, Krishanu. Hi, Amit. What a joy it is to be here.
Hi, good to have you.
Great. So the subject today, as I mentioned a while back, is quantum business and leadership, and this is, to our mind, is one of the areas which we cannot do without. It is so important because everything eventually, whatever comes out, leadership is necessary. Business is something that we cannot do without again. And the way things are going, very apparently, that Newtonian world is not really working out. The global warmings and things we discussed in the last episode, if you have not watched it, please watch it. You will get to know the context. So, in this atmosphere, we need to delve deep into what it is that makes the difference, that makes the cut. And we believe quantum science is that. So, Professor Goswami, over to you.
Thank you, Krishanu. Hello, everyone. Welcome, Sujit. The introduction to quantum leadership in business I already gave in the last webinar. If you need to have some exposure how quantum science looks at leadership and of course, economy that the leadership is dealing with, you can watch last week's broadcast. I won't repeat much of it except to say that there is a crisis condition. Everybody knows that the current system is not working. Everybody also knows that leaders today are very me-centered, and what we need is some community centering as well. Ethics should come back for one thing, which is excluded by scientific materialism. So we need to bring back ethics. So on the whole, we need a quantum leadership that is not based on materialist worldview and Newtonian physics. That's what brings in this. I am an independent individual, separate from the society and all that. We cannot function that way. And quantum science is the perfect answer because quantum science says that material metaphysics is all incomplete. Matter is important, but it is not the ground of all being. Consciousness is the ground of all being instead. And matter and mind both are possibilities of consciousness to choose from. So this is where the quantum reader starts. If the mind has to be included, if emotions have to be included, then what does the reader need to do? We mentioned creativity a lot last time, and of course, creativity is extremely important. It gives not only the courage to deal with the new for the quantum reader, creativity enables the quantum reader to have confidence in what he or she is doing, a fantastic amount of mastery over the material because it will be coming to him or her from the dimension of the possibility, what is potentiality in us. So quantum reader takes all this into account and develops the charisma that is not based on pretension and acting, but based on some real stuff. In other words, it reflects his own character, the morality that he really has, the ethical standing, moral uh, leadership. That's what it is. So quantum reader transforms himself or herself as they apply quantum principles to change life and change the world. In this case, change the world's economy mostly, but really today business contributes a tremendous amount that goes outside the bounds of just economy. It's also in the power game. Cannot be helped. So let's hear from Sujit because he has thought about these problems a lot and he has contributed, especially in this how businesses enter the power game, war and peace, and all those issues. Sujit?
Thank you, Amit. Um, everything you shared resonates very profoundly with me, not just because of my own um, road tests, but also because of the observations I have from the organization world. And when I refer to organization world, I don't refer only to the world of business or the world of politics. It's also the non-profit world, social leadership. And if I look at the world that I live in, Amit, we are living in the wake of at least four powerful forces that we are in the midst of or we've just experienced. One being the pandemic. We fortunately, I hope, we've come out of that, but we are still in the hangover of the pandemic. And then soon after that started the geopolitical crisis. And that is a crisis not confined to Russia and Ukraine. It is a crisis that's a global crisis, even in a country like India or South America, in parts of Africa. They are experiencing the suffering that comes from the geopolitical crisis. And of course, for the last decade and a half, the whole climate crisis is starting to become more and more severe. And now, to add to the pain, artificial intelligence has started to accelerate so exponentially that we are now organizationally spoken. My counterparts within organizations, whether they are business, non-profit, or political, they recognize that they are in the middle of a perfect storm. And their conditioned instinct, as I've observed, I keep noticing every day, is to always keep relying on the technocratic solutions. Oh, there's a geopolitical crisis. Let us think about rolling back NATO. We have a climate crisis. Let's focus on creating new instruments like carbon trading, etc. Technocratic approach towards leadership. Let's equip our leadership with more technocratic know-how and skills. And the realization that, wait a moment, our leadership is completely ill equipped to handle the perfect storm, and we need a completely different frame of leadership that is just kind of marginally starting to become clear. And yet they don't have the answer, but clearly they're saying, like, yes, the technocratic rail for leadership is important, but then we need to go forward also on the consciousness rail alongside the technocratic rail. That awareness is starting to emerge, the suffering being so severe in organization world, that now I'm starting to notice a certain openness, Amit, in them starting to welcome listening to alternate approaches to leadership. And one of the phenomenal things that I've so loved listening to you speak over and over, Amit, is about the various types of archetypal explorations. you know and the more and more I'm introducing that into the conversation within organizations, I'm starting to notice inquisitiveness happen. Like the leaders are starting to, okay, help me understand what that is, and how that relates to consciousness, and how that could be a solution to the pain that we are suffering. And also, just a minute ago, Amit, you spoke about leaders starting to recognize emotions, feelings, the thoughts, intuition. Suddenly, the whole spectrum of leadership inquiry is becoming very fascinating. And I don't know anybody, Amit, other than you, who is the right authority to guide a conversation around the leadership of the future. I mean, the leadership which is very deeply grounded on the idea of consciousness. So I'd love to hear from you, Amit, this the idea of recognizing emotions, feelings, thoughts, intuition, etc., on the one hand, and the whole archetypal exploration, how that is integral to the evolution of the future leader. Can you expand that a little bit so that I can learn and take away something?
Well, okay, these are very good questions. I covered a little bit of it in the last webinar, but indeed, the human condition that every leader inherits from the brain has to be mentioned first, which is both of these aspects that you mentioned, me-centeredness, responsible for the very constricted bias that only wants to consider the personal aspect of an archetype. Archetypes are everywhere. We cannot avoid them because they're part of us also, but in potentiality. The part that a business person who is me-centered gets naturally is the part about building wealth for himself, prosperity for himself, for herself. And that is part of it, but that is, the image that we have, archetypal image that we have of that kind of outlook is the King Midas, who touches things and it becomes gold. Today, business people know how to succeed in making money. Billionaires are abundant today. So they have the Midas touch. What they don't have is also what Midas didn't have. Midas was never happy. He never had enough. So
Hmm.
what is the mystery of happiness, which is of course what a leader or even a person needs in order to really be optimal in the way he or she does things. If people do things, if people guide things, if people lead things from unhappiness, this is not going to solve problems. It's only going to create problems. Look at the mayhem, just to give an example, that the new billionaire owner of Twitter, a organization which was created with a wonderful logo, is doing to that organization. New logo is only part of it. Uh, anyway, I won't dwell on that. The other thing, of course, is the emphasis on emotions. We inherit negative emotions from our animal ancestry, and we got to get rid of it because look, people are needed. Middle management research people are unavoidable in an organization. The owner of the idea cannot do it all by himself. So there has to be intermediate leaders in a big business. And those leaders have to deal with people. If, in fact, the owner himself, herself, have to deal with people. And people skill requires some emotional intelligence. This is not entirely new to quantum science. Transpersonal psychologists are already pointing this out, except
Mhm.
that quantum science, by its ability to deal with the brain and the subjective aspects of all these issues, is a better vehicle, because when we say transformation, we know also what we need to do with the brain. The circuits, misinternets, they are built into the brain. So you got to understand what we have to do with the brain in order to go ahead with
Mhm.
transformation. This is why transpersonal models are not very useful. The quantum models deal with that. Quantum models also deals with miscenterness, doing simply implementing the idea that is also built in, already built in. This is the discovery of Carl Jung, built in the collective unconscious, that we need to explore the archetype of abundance along with the archetype of goodness or love, which then will get rid of that Midas problem, giving in satisfaction in making money because I'm sharing my money with others. The game changes. Not only do we make the possibility of prosperity infinite, because the potentialities are really infinite, but also we bring satisfaction in this, because when we share with it, I don't need this constant wanting, more money, where will it end? So that entering of satisfaction optimizes the potentiality of the leader, prepares the leader not to have a artificial personality, artificial charisma. Instead, the leader can be authentic and effective. So this is what we can get at with quantum worldview. Krishanu, you
Very
have
inspiring.
something?
Yeah, so I was very interested in, see, if we look at this whole subject, it's a huge one, and we probably will not be able to contain all aspects of it in such short a time. But one thing I would like to point out is the value system. That if we look at the conventional leaders that we see in most of the larger organized businesses, corporations, and stuff like that, they have, as you said, the me-centeredness. Everything goes for what is it in. I mean, even if we look at managers of large organizations today, they talk about a lot of fancy things, but what they really are bothered about is their stock options and bonuses. That's what my understanding is. And because I have spent a lot of time in corporates, and I have seen people going 180-degree out of phase instantly if the situation suits them. Now, it very clearly does not evoke a sense of respect for these people, but they don't care a damn. I'm sorry for the language, but this is how it is. So I was wondering, this value system of how things are, it is not very prevalent. But at the same time, I have come across people who take this very seriously, who take authenticity seriously, who take ethics seriously. And you were talking about billionaires. It is very true. Maybe most of the people who are making money, they don't know where to end, but I do know a few people who are entrepreneurs and who have lived to a certain extent. I mean, they have lived in money and stuff like that, but they know where to draw the line. They know where the brake in the car is. So this is, I feel, is very important to know. Except anything else, where do we draw this line? Where do we say, okay, that is enough, no more consumerism? Amit was mentioning it in the last webinar, and this is too factually true. Unless there is a check on the consumerism, on the pleasure centeredness that we generally have, there is no way we can reverse this trend of global warming. No matter how many carbs we bring in, it's not going to change much. So this ethics, authenticity, this part is where I think a lot of emphasis must go. And here, the understanding, see, what happens today is it's pretty much everyone is for himself. So I am there, I'll have to make as much money as I'll have to enjoy as much power as possible. I have this one life and that's it. Like, so this is a very constricted way of thinking. But should we give it a thought that, okay, this is not the end, this is I am not this. And if we really start believing, and it becomes not only a habit but our character, that yes, consciousness is the ground of all being and there are certain things we can never do, then is the chance for the whole mankind to come back. And here we have a very, very significant role to play, because I am quite emphatically believer of the fact that people are, basically most of the people, I should not say, they are not as stupid as they seem. It's not like that. It's absolutely not like that. People are intelligent, people understand what they are. It is just the conditioning which is happening over decades of this materialist knowledge and scientific materialism, that people have started to believe this is the only way. And look at the future challenges. So AI, of course, is one of the biggest one. Now people are coming up with quantum computers, which will be like million times faster than the computer. We were already worried about AI, which was driven on a conventional computer. Think about that both the hardware and the software takes a quantum jump. What happens then? Right. So that is where the challenge comes, and that is where we must prepare ourselves now before things really, really go out of control. So on the parts of the ethics and the value system, I would like to have a view from Professor Goswami, is that how do you see that this way of thinking in a quantum scientific way impact the behavior of the people in the real sense?
Well, when Adam Smith founded capitalism, he really was implicitly aware that ethics is important. Although his formulation mentions only the selfish interest of the producers and the consumers. But there is a footnote, and the footnote clearly mentions ethics, that the invisible hands of the free market will come to the aid of establishing equilibrium, but ethics is part of it. His intuition also was that ethics is part of it. He could not define any better than invisible hands of the free market. But today, with quantum science to guide us, we know what those invisible hands are. They are hands of consciousness. It's the movement of consciousness.
Right.
And the movement of consciousness is purposive, is moral, is towards exploring and embodying the archetypes for the leaders. So it brings back ethics in a hurry. That look, unless we are ethical, the economy will not be sustainable. Today, what we have is to have a lot of wealth, but this all can just disappear in a moment. Why? Because it's extremely unstable. First of all, the income disparity that people have some consciousness of. But second of all, we are running on huge amounts of artificial bookkeeping, which hides the fact that every country is loaded with huge amounts of national debt. Now, nothing can build on emptiness. So if the money is not there and we are spending it, we are really taking it from future generations. And so there will be a time when there will be no capital for future generations. And in addition, of course, there is the computer, and you were absolutely right. I talked about the generative AI programs last time, but I did not mention this other thing, quantum computers. If you add hardware improvement with the software improvement, then you also bring down the cost of doing all this. Right now, of course, generative AI is prohibitive for one to really, really use it, every person to really, really use it. You have to depend on uh, businesses to make it available to individual use. But if it is really becomes cheap, like quantum computers, then we'll be able to directly use those AI programs and imagine the power of that. And the fact is that using those AI programs, a quantum reader in the present schema will not even need all these things that we are talking about, the middle management, everything he or she can do himself. But that, of course, will be completely selfish and ruin the world in a matter of just a decade. This is the future if we don't do something about it. So it is imperative that we realize that movement of consciousness, what that is about. The purpose is to bring these archetypes, and we have to tune in to the purpose. If we don't tune in, huge amount of instability and suffering. Part of it, this present crisis is just a hint of what can happen. But the future crisis will probably be hundreds of times more deep and more disturbing. Sujit, please.
Amen to that. Indeed, for all the heavy suffering there is around, I totally acknowledge what you share, that it is just the tip of the iceberg. And in both what you shared, Amit, around ethics, but also the archetypes and the focus on the self, and Krishanu, what you shared just now, you have appropriately placed the focus on the self, on the person of the leader. And for so long, at least in the ecosystem that I spend a lot of my time, the the leaders, most of the leaders that I know, they have not appropriately understood how much the movement of consciousness within themselves has an impact on the organization, like the outward rippling waves. Um, and Amit, what you shared very briefly earlier in the conversation, I noted that down. You referring to the focus on profits versus the focus on prosperity. And I remember, going through, integrating quantum leadership, the amazing piece of work that you're putting together. And in the process of me diving into that and sourcing what wants to be shared from within me, I came to realize that this me-centeredness that you talk about from a leadership perspective automatically inclines somebody towards, you know, if there's a word, self-prosperity, we can use that word, but profitability. There is, at least among the leadership class that I know that I try to hold space for and support, um, profitability, the profitability motive comes from a very, very me-centered space. Whereas those leaders that I know who are very strongly inclined towards prosperity, I notice it always comes out of this non-local oneness, community-centered focus. That I've started to realize that these leaders who are inclined towards prosperity, by the very definition of the word prosperity has got the collective included in that, I notice that these are leaders who are naturally inclined towards oneness. It's the prosperity yearning comes out of them because they feel a sense of kinship with others, whether it is their shareholders, whether it is their employees, whether it's with their suppliers and customers, or even when it comes to the payment of taxes. So that dichotomy that you referred to very briefly, profit versus prosperity, that I feel somehow brings it down to earth in a very elegant way, Amit, in a way where normal organization leaders can relate to quantum science, me centeredness versus community centeredness, all that. So just wanted to highlight and own that for myself.
Yeah, I mean, see, Sujit, I'd just like to add here. A lot of people, they are kind of scared off by this quantum science, lots of equations, psi equal to this, that. But it is not really. If we look at quantum science in a very, very clear way, that there is absolutely nothing to fear of. It's just the assumptions that make the difference. So if we make an assumption that everything is matter and then think about quantum science, it will certainly seem weird. But if we think that consciousness is the ground of being, then it will seem natural that this is, and there cannot be anything else. So that is, when we talk about people who are not aligned, who think that this approach is a little complicated, it is for them. It is really not. It is the simplest approach, actually.
Yeah.
It's not the complicated
Yeah.
approach. And
And
yeah,
and
please.
Krishanu, sorry, and Krishanu and Amit, to your credit, CQA for me is a uniquely exceptional organization where you are, democratizing the idea of quantum science to the extent that the mainstream leaders and organizations can embrace it. And I don't know any other knowledge center or excellence center which has done such extensive thinking as CQA has done. Both you, Amit, and Krishanu, you bear credit for that. To that democratization process, I would be inclined to even use a word and say demystify quantum science, but I'm very careful not to choose a wrong word to express my emotion, my sentiment that you are making it accessible. And that for me is a tremendous explosion of opportunity that you're opening up for leaders and establishment organizations to start embracing methodologies and models that can help frame their current pain in a completely new way.
I mean, it is really Professor Goswami. I am just an associate. So the credit entirely, totally goes to Professor Goswami. Please
Not true.
don't keep me in
Not
the
true.
social ons with him. Well,
Not true. These guys are very, very helpful in taking these ideas and developing them. So don't believe a word that they're saying now. That's out of humility, which is good. But we probably should end this webinar because of time, right?
yeah, yeah.
So let me just add a final thing, which is that um, the other thing that some people get scared of, especially people who are intellectuals who live on rational thinking, is the mention of quantum science, mention of quantum worldview being based on primacy of consciousness, automatically integrates spirituality with science, and they're very scared of the word spirituality. That's the word, especially the G word, God word, that really scares them. Mostly it is due to a power play. They thought they have won the game with religions, but religions is easy to fight with because they have concepts which sound very primitive, like God sitting on a throne in outer space and dealing our what to do with us after we die. That kind of image can be easily dispensed with because we have gone to the moon and we have not found any God sitting on a throne there. God is supposed to be omnipresent, should have been there on the moon, but nobody found him. But look, the consciousness way of looking at spirituality cannot be refuted that easily, but there is no reason to be scared about spirituality either. We don't have to bring it in when we talk about prosperity, when we talk about archetypes. The truth is, initially, the people who studied consciousness, they also mistook that the objective of human life is just to explore the nature of consciousness. And that's what spirituality seems to be so embracive. World is not important, only spirit is important. That is not the view of quantum science. Quantum science is saying that the world is the only thing there really is for most people. And the archetypes are created. The reason we need to embody archetypes is that when we explore an archetype through our professions, through our occupation, like a business person really explores archetype of abundance seriously, then he or she discovers that we have to explore it with love and goodness, and that automatically solves the kind of crisis problems that we are talking about. So this is really the objective, the purpose of consciousness, not to go for the spirit and the high-mindedness that the spiritual traditions usually mislead people with, but they misled with not because of deliberation, they misled because they didn't know better. The material world, the much of our constitution, the brain, the immune system, these things were not known. Now we have the scientific basis of who we are and what we can be, and it is time to change those archaic views of spirituality. It's time to realize that no, it's not that. We really want to bring the archetypes in our midst to live better and optimally. And we can make such a wonderful world doing that. There's no reason to delve with so much
Yeah.
mud and put so much mud on our being.
Wow, beautifully said.
Absolutely. Well, good thing. No, the bad thing first, right?
Oh, yeah.
The bad thing is that we are going to end in a minute. The good thing is that we are going to continue the same subject in the next episode as well with another guest. And please let us know what you think about it. You can email us at info@amitgoswami.org. You can write on our Facebook page, whatever you like. And we would be very keen to know your views on these subjects that we are talking about. Uh, the fact is, everyone, every human being living on this planet is impacted by this subject. No one is spared. So if you really want to express your views, we would really love to hear about them, and we will get back to you in case you need any clarifications. Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much, Sujit, for giving us this time. And we are looking forward to host you again. Thank you, Professor
Thank you.
Goswami, for your valuable words. It was a wonderful session, according to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Big hugs to all of you.